Llegó la primavera JCPenney con la última moda. Piezas cómodas y ligeras. Mezcla y combina lo nuevo de tus marcas favoritas y crea looks originales que se acomodan a tu presupuesto. Como las polos de St. John's Bay con un pantalón en algodón o un simple suéter y jeans de A&A. Encuentra el bolso de Liz Claiborne que siempre has querido y sandalias que combinen. Para noches más cálidas, elige pijamas ligeras y frescas de Ambriel. Trae a tu familia y descubran lo nuevo de primavera. JCPenney. Vale la pena.
Hello and welcome to How Did This Not Get Made?
This is a podcast all about the movies you never saw, the scripts that were never filmed, and the ideas that never even made it to the page. My name is David Spencer.
And my name is Daniel Kaka.
And we are doing our first recording since the podcast has actually been released, which is exciting.
This is great.
And already we've had a couple of people shouting out to us and noticing what we got going on, which is really cool to see. So,
yeah. No, it's really exciting to see the people's response, seeing some listeners, some fans already, I guess.
Yeah.
One podcast that I feel like we need to mention that I've been really enjoying and has actually kind of helped me go through some of this research as well is the Canceled Movie Report.
Yeah, that's another really cool podcast. And when you first pointed this out to me, Dan, I was worried for a second. I was like, uh-oh, somebody else is doing exactly what we're doing. But it's not exactly what we're doing, and it's kind of a cool companion piece. They are more taking a complete script and reading through it and kind of discussing it, but they're talking more about the content of these scripts that were never filmed, as opposed to what we're doing, which is more about the story behind the making of it and the lack of making of it. You know, you can always approach different subjects from different angles and fill in different pieces of information with different focuses, and there's no need for competition here.
No. So if you want to hear more of their stuff, I would highly recommend heading over to their podcast if you want to listen to these really well done table reads. It reminds me a lot of the Blacklist table reads.
And I know that we'll probably be mentioning them a little bit more throughout the episode today, but Dan, why don't you go ahead and tell us what we are talking about?
So we are talking about Gladiator 2, which is supposed to be the sequel to the Academy Award-winning Best Picture winner, Gladiator.
Who is he? Will you remove your helmet and tell me your name?
My name is Gladiator.
Now, this is another one of those legends in unfilmed scripts. I have heard so much rumor and misinformation about this project. It's kind of one of those weird fables that kind of exists in the brains of a lot of film fans. Right on the face, it's so ridiculous. Spoilers for Gladiator, but the main character dies at the end of that movie. How do you do a Gladiator 2?
Yeah.
I know that this script has a lot of insanity to it, but I'm also sure that there are elements of the story that I have wrong. I mean, right off the bat, I won't get into specifics, but I know like there's one thing that everybody points to that I always thought was the entirety of the story, but really is only the last couple of pages of the script.
Like, I read through the script and I had heard about this absurdity as well that was definitely over-embellished, to find out that it's really just the last 2 pages.
I'm sure we'll get more into that, but you read the entire script, Dan?
Yes, I have.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Well, let's get into it, and I'm excited to learn.
Okay, so I think most of us know about Gladiator, but I will say that it has been a while, and by a little while, I mean like 20 years, probably.
Yeah. Was it 2000 that it got Best Picture?
Yep, 2000 is when it came out.
Right.
It's completely understandable that if you have not watched this recently, or this hasn't really been in your brain for a little while, or at least in recent memory, but to at least bring up some information about it. Gladiator, it came out in the year 2000. It was notably one of Russell Crowe's most iconic roles. The film was directed by Ridley Scott. I mean, if you don't remember, he's also done other films such as Alien, Blade Runner, Thelma and Louise, G.I. Jane, Black Hawk Down, Kingdom of Heaven, American Gangster, and The Martian fairly recently.
Before this, he was most known for his sci-fi work. And while I was not old enough to be paying attention to film discussion at the time, I'm sure it was kind of a surprising move for somebody like Russell Crowe to be taking on this sword and sandals epic.
Yeah. I enjoy that you brought up that it was a sword and sandals type genre, because that is kind of a genre, and that dates back to Spartacus or movies like that, where Hollywood would definitely recognize those movies as like the upper echelon of like what movies should be. And I think for someone like Ridley Scott, who came from sci-fi, I feel like his transition to doing this kind of mirrors the same transition that James Cameron did when he did Titanic, where James Cameron came from a sci-fi background but wasn't really recognized by the Academy until he made Titanic. Ridley Scott, I feel like the same thing happened with him, where he was a renowned filmmaker, but because he was, for a lot of the time, I think we'll exclude Thelma and Louise, for a lot of the time he stuck with sci-fi, but with Gladiator, with the sword and sandals genre, that's when he really got recognized by the Academy.
How many Alien directors went on to get Oscars 20 years later? Because James Cameron and Ridley Scott did.
David
Does
Fincher?
David Fincher have an Oscar?
I feel like
he's been nominated.
Did he get something from Girl with the Dragon Tattoo?
Maybe. Nope, it just says nominated for Oscars, but he hasn't won any.
Man, he really deserves something.
He was nominated for directing for The Social Network and A Curious Case of Benjamin Button.
Ah, yes. At least he's being somewhat recognized by them. But yeah, eventually he'll get an Oscar, and if anything, he'll probably get like a Lifetime Achievement Award.
He has won an Emmy for directing for House of Cards.
Oh yeah, I remember that. That was a big deal, because that was when Netflix first started dabbling in making their own television shows. And for everyone who was looking at Netflix is like, this is just a streaming service, so I can just watch movies and shows, like just binge watch it all. Like, they shouldn't be making their own stuff. And for them to come out hitting hard with like a well-decorated filmmaker to direct a pilot.
And with massive star power director, high budget TV series.
Yeah.
Back in the day when Netflix invested in projects and took risks. And
they're still doing that.
I'm just bitter at Netflix now, mostly because they canceled BoJack. But this is beside the point.
Yeah.
What do you think of Gladiator? Like, what are your opinions on that movie?
It has actually been a long time since I've watched Gladiator, because I'm trying to think of when I would have seen it last. I was around 10, 11 years old when it came out. I saw it as just another movie, but I do remember it being one of those, I think it was around the time that the internet was coming out, IMDb was coming out, and a lot of attention was on there. And the one thing that I really like to look at on IMDb was the trivia and goofs. I remember that Gladiator was just filled with a bunch of goofs and stuff you could see in the background. Like, you could see a car in the background. You could see some of the hydraulics pipes in the background used in the fight scenes, and just like a whole lot of continuity errors. And that was just nothing that I really ever thought about in movies before, was continuity errors. It's weird that like that was my idea of this movie, was just like it was filled with continuity errors, and I wasn't really thinking so much about the content itself.
Yeah, that's a movie for me. I watched later as an adult. I think I probably watched it for the first time in film school because I had a teacher who was a very big fan of it. It's one of those movies that it's like, it's fine. I don't remember too much about it. It doesn't really stick in my brain as something super special. Although it is one of the first big performances of Joaquin Phoenix, who, has since become a big part of film and film conversation. And he is excellent as the Commodus. He's excellent.
Am I not merciful?
I know he certainly turned into a meme. I guess still nowadays, but I remember the early parts of the internet, like his thumbs down is the disapproval.
Yeah.
Definitely has been memed.
There's this animated thing called Garfieldiator on YouTube.
Typical Monday for comedies.
It's by animator El-Cid, and it's basically just Garfield plus Gladiator. It's just a couple of random scenes from Gladiator, but with Garfield standing in. Sometimes it's Maximus, sometimes other characters, sometimes just Garfield being Garfield. It's very strange. You should go watch it.
All right. I'll take note of that.
It has quite possibly one of the best walk cycles I've ever seen in animation. There's like this ridiculous walk cycle. It keeps cutting back and forth.
I'm watching it right now. He's with his fingers
Yep.
waving through the air. All right, this is pretty awesome. I like this. Brilliant.
Gladiator 2.
But that's the sequel that should have happened.
Yep.
Let's bring it back a little, because we were talking about the Academy recognizing these directors. Now, for Gladiator, it was actually nominated that year for 12 Academy Awards. It won 5 of them, which was Best Picture, like I mentioned before. Russell Crowe got Best Actor. It got Best Costume Design, Best Sound, and Best Visual Effects. It also received 4 BAFTA awards for Best Film, Best Cinematography, Best Production Design, and Best Editing. The film grossed about $187.7 million just in the US and made over $450 million worldwide. I mean, judging from that, it makes absolute sense that the studio would look at this and be like, this was a huge hit. We might as well do a sequel to it because people are going to watch it.
Yeah. I mean, this is still when, in the era of something like Titanic, where a big budget popular movie could also be the Best Picture winner. That's kind of like the last of that era. I feel like there's probably nothing after Gladiator that is close to it, of a big budget popular movie that wins Best Picture. That's kind of like the start of there being the divide between popular movies and Academy praise movies. I don't think it would have been as obvious to make a sequel, because nobody is saying, let's make Titanic 2. I know somebody did make Titanic 2. That was not a official thing, but nobody is saying, let's make Forrest Gump 2. I mean, I guess I do see where the appeal is. It seems like the type of thing that if they already had a good story to tell, it makes sense to do a sequel. And based off of what I know about this, a lot of the push for a sequel came from Russell Crowe really wanting to keep doing something with this.
It was coming from all sorts of directions, and I was looking into what was the earliest signs of this sequel. DreamWorks, they were the ones who were behind it. There was an interview with Douglas Wick, who was a producer on Gladiator. He did an interview with Popcorn UK, and he said, certainly something is being discussed, and there has been no decision made. We're looking at a lot of options. You don't finally do something like that unless you have a dazzling story to tell. What we certainly won't do is some shadow of the first one to grind out a few bucks. So it looks like they were really looking for a unique story, and it looks like a lot of things were just being put onto the table and just kind of being distributed out there. And it kind of makes sense why he was so vague, knowing what they did after that.
Yeah.
Like you mentioned before, the spoiler, Maximus dies at the end. What do you do with that? So to work around the fact that Maximus has died, the studio decided that it would be best to make a prequel so that Russell Crowe was still part of the project. DreamWorks, they were actually prepared to pay Russell Crowe $20 million to be part of this franchise. The script was going to be written by David Franzoni, who was one of the co-writers of the original Gladiator script, and it was going to be the story behind Max's journey in the Roman military as he makes his way from being a soldier to a general. Making the prequel kind of makes sense to follow the journey of Maximus, but here's the thing that, and you'll see this as we go through, it's not a Gladiator movie anymore.
Yeah.
There's no Gladiator fights. It's a movie about Maximus. It's the Maximus story, but how are you going to fit a Gladiator scene of some sort in there? So I can definitely start seeing issues with that. So then the script was then assigned to another former Gladiator writer, John Logan, who would then make a sequel that was going to be set 15 years in the future from the original. Now, the producer, Walker Parks, he explained, we can go backwards in time and forward. The piece revolves around Connie Nielsen's son, which is Lucius, who is the last heir of Marcus Aurelius. Rome has become a fascist state, and we have a prince who needs to find out who his father is. The twist in this film is that Lucius finds out that Maximus is his real father. Now, Ridley Scott was on board for the script and was determined to film this soon, stating that, "We've already done quite a lot of work on the drafts now. The target would be early 2005. Now, the sequel would most likely not include Russell Crowe and no gladiators." Ridley Scott again said that this had to be the next generation. Roman history is so exotic that any part of this is really fascinating. History is far more exotic than anything you can dream up. The film will take the next step, which is the son.
I've been reading to dear Lucius.
I've been reading too.
Yes, he's a very clever little boy. He'll make a grand emperor one day.
I wouldn't touch the gladiatorial side again. We have to go to the next step. The film is more politics and praetorians, the parts that are interesting, which always lead to conflict. Again, we run into the same problem. It's not gladiators.
Well, they've kind of shot themselves in the foot with that title and any hope of sequels around this, because when you're writing a story about gladiators, if you're just having it as a series of combats, that's not going to have the drama that they want to have. There probably could be a way to do that, but it would be an entirely different movie. And so it seems like in the search to find the drama of this story, they focus it on the politics and the dying of the emperor and Commodus coming in to take over. And they make the most interesting parts of the movie not about being a gladiator.
Yeah.
And they also make it so, like, the only parts you can really continue with, either in the past or the future, are not about being a gladiator.
Yeah. I think part of it is that they're trying to attach the name Gladiator to, which nowadays, when it comes to sequels and prequels, we're no longer really adding numbers onto the ends of our movies. So, like, we even see with Marvel movies, we don't see something like Avengers 3, Avengers 4. We're like getting Avengers : Age of Ultron,
which
something.
I really don't like personally. I feel like it's been a big trend in the way movies are marketed, and I wonder, like, even something like Star Wars that is numbered, it is always marketed as Star Wars: The Force Awakens. You know, none of those trailers ever say Episode 7 in them. I wonder if it's just because studio heads are worried that people won't see the thing if they know that there's something that came before it and they don't want to be left out, if that's the reasoning behind it. But I personally think that's dumb. Tell people if it's a part 2 so that way they can catch up on the part 1. We live in the age of streaming. People can watch whatever they want whenever they want to.
Yeah.
Stop being cowards, studio heads.
For the prequel, I think the prequel would be more interesting because then you're still following the story of Maximus. But if you just name the movie Maximus, a gladiator story,
I think you could just call it Maximus and people will know. Like, especially if you announce that a year or two after Gladiator, people will know that when you're talking about Maximus, you're talking about Russell Crowe in Gladiator.
Yeah.
And I definitely think that's something that they could have done and could have marketed.
I think it was just too early for that. Had Gladiator been made more recently, I think the sequel would have come out sooner with all that in mind, that they didn't have to attach like a gladiator, a title to it, which seems confusing. Now, these are the reasonable pitches that were out there. We have to talk about the most ridiculous one, which was Nick Cave's story. Now, this is Nick Cave, Cave, not Nicolas Cage. Completely different person.
Oh, man, that would be amazing too, though.
Yeah. Has Nicolas Cage ever written anything? I wonder. I hope so. I really hope so. I want him to come out with like a book of his own poetry.
Oh gosh, that would be incredible.
So anyway, Nick Cave. If you don't know, Nick Cave is an Australian singer. He's a songwriter, best known for being the frontman of the band Nick Cave and the Bad Seeds, where they earned their reputation of being the most violent band in the world.
Oh,
yeah. His songs are dark, strange, but oddly really, really well composed. So if we take the song Red Right Hand, in the lyrics, if you read them, it says, "He'll trap you in his arms, tell you that you've been a good boy. He'll rekindle all the dreams it took you a lifetime to destroy." It's so poetically dark and interesting. It's so strange that, like, Nick Cave, he wasn't really known for being in any movies. I think he wrote a script back in the 80s. I don't know if you're looking at his IMDb at all, but there was one other movie that he wrote, Ghost of the Civil Dead.
They brought in the psychos. The administration knew the tensions that existed. They knew people would start to crack. They brought in these psychos anyway. Dregs of the whole system.
Here goes the neighborhood.
That one was in 1988. And after that, just nothing else. He just kind of went on and kept on going with his music career. Although more recently, Nick Cave has had his hand in movies for quite some time now. He is now known for composing the music for Hell or High Water and the assassination of Jesse James by the coward Robert Ford. Oh. He's written The Proposition and Lawless, which he also scored.
I saw Lawless. That was a movie with Tom Hardy in it.
Yes.
Cave and his frequent collaborator, Warren Ellis, have crafted some of the best scores of the century. Cave seems to have found his calling with scoring westerns.
On top of all that, like, his music has been featured in a lot of things, like more recently, Tiger King, Peaky Blinders, True Detective, The Lobster, True Blood, Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows, Shrek 2, Hellboy, Scream 2, Dumb and Dumber, and a lot more.
Wow.
Like, seriously, this guy he's all over the place. He's made for movies.
The list you just gave, is that him doing the music for it, or is that like one of his songs being used in the soundtrack?
That is his songs being used in there. But for him composing music for Hell or High Water and the assassination of Jesse James, like, he actually composed it specifically for those. And we see this with, like, other artists as well, where they may not be very well known. Like, one of my favorite artists, his name is Damien Rice. He's a Irish folk singer. Like, not many people know him, and he's one of my favorite artists out there. But if you look at his IMDb, you'll realize that his songs have been in everything. Also, Damien Rice was in Shrek 2, so yeah. But you would never know unless you, like, actually knew him as an artist.
Yeah.
It's like Kevin MacLeod. He's in everything, but no one knows it.
Yeah, totally.
So at the time, Nick Cave was mostly known for his music. He had written the one screenplay, which was Ghosts of the Civil and Dead. But he was at the request of Russell Crowe to write the sequel. Now, Crowe had been looking into the Roman beliefs of the afterlife and became very interested in making a story based on this. This is probably why Russell was not interested in the first two movie ideas, which makes sense that not only do you have to get the studio approval, producer's approval, but definitely Russell Crowe, the star of the movie, they need to get his approval as well. Cave recalls having gotten a request from Russell saying, eventually he rang me up and asked if I wanted to write Gladiator 2, and for someone who had only written one script, it was quite an ask. He even followed up by asking, hey, Russell, didn't you die in Gladiator 1? In which Russell replied, yeah, you sort that out.
It really does seem like the craziest aspects of this stem from Russell Crowe. Russell Crowe has a pretty expansive career. He's been in a lot of movies and in a lot of successful movies. But one thing he's never had that almost every other actor of his caliber has is a franchise. I think there are attempts at a franchise in his career. I think things like the Universal Dark Universe is an attempt at being part of a franchise, but he's never had that franchising. Like, if you compare it to somebody like Liam Neeson, who is in all over the place in other franchises, but has things like the Taken franchise that are his movies. And Russell Crowe never really had that. Looking at his career, I think there were lots of attempts at that, whether it was Robin Hood. I mean, this could have been a motivation early on that Russell Crowe is seeing this and saying, okay, I need to make sure that I've got a bankable franchise, so I turn this one movie success into a series of surefire hits.
Yeah, that's kind of like with Fast and the Furious is such a strange franchise to think about and how that came about, because it started off with just street racing.
Yeah.
And now they're like international government agent spies. Like, how did you make that giant leap? But I mean, it works. People still watch it.
Yeah.
So I guess this is kind of his way of saying that it started off one way and you can somehow franchise it into a completely different thing, but somehow keep it going.
Mm-hmm.
But Nick Cave's script was being taken seriously. Ridley Scott, he told UGO, "We tried to go with Cave's script. Russell didn't want to let it go, obviously because it worked very well. When I say worked very well, I don't refer to success. I mean, as a piece of it works really well. Storytelling, it works brilliantly. I think Cave enjoyed doing it, and I think it was one of those things that he thought, well, maybe there's a sequel where we can adjust the fantasy and bring Maximus back from the dead. This sequel went into a wildly different direction and was rejected by the studio, but the script has been leaked to a few people to read, which is probably why I got to read it."
One thing that I think is interesting about that quote that I will get into more once we've gone through what the plot is, but the idea that, like, as a story, it works, but it's still too insane and ridiculous to actually do.
So according to Nick Cave, he says, as his plot summary.
So he goes to purgatory.
Yeah.
And is sent down by the gods who are dying in heaven because there's this one god, there's this Christ character down on earth who is gaining popularity, and so the many gods are dying, and so they send Gladiator back to kill Christ and all his followers. And so this was already getting in. I wanted to call it Christ Killer, and in the end, you find out that the main guy was his son, so he has to kill his son, and he's tricked by the gods and all of this sort of stuff. So it ends with this, he becomes this eternal warrior, and it ends with this 20-minute war sequence that follows all the wars of history right up to Vietnam and all of that sort of stuff. And it was wild.
That is wild.
Russian tanks. And
so that was the last third of the movie, or the last.
That was the last thing, and
wow, that sounds amazing.
Yeah, no, it was a stone cold masterpiece.
And then he did say what Russell Crowe's response was: "Don't like it, mate." Imagine that, to be personally asked by Russell Crowe to come up with this wild story, to put so much work into it.
Yeah.
To have that one person who's the only person that believes in you, because rightfully so, he's only written one script before. No studio is looking at Nick Cave to be like, you're going to write the next masterpiece after this movie that had won the Academy Award for Best Picture.
Yeah.
And Russell Crowe's the only one to be like, you should write it. And he's like, I wrote it. And he's like, yeah, but you didn't write it how I wanted to write it.
Even was willing to go with the crazy spiritualism thing. But also what's interesting about, like, Nick Cave's description of that is that is not how the actual script goes. Like, it's kind of over-exaggerating some of these themes of the underworld. Like, that's definitely there. He goes to purgatory, but it's definitely exaggerating the role of, like, gods and stuff in the story. At least it seems.
Yeah. So unless he, like, had a grander idea of where this movie was going, it doesn't feel like it, at least in our heads, like, it doesn't feel like we focus on it. And I forget who the writer was, but he gave an interview about how Ridley Scott will pitch a movie, and Ridley Scott will, for some odd reason, really focus in on things that don't matter. Like, he could focus in on, like, what kind of coffee cup a character drinks coffee out of, and, like, how he takes his coffee. And it's like, why is this relevant at all for a movie pitch? Like, this is something that you tell to your production designer. I feel like he kind of fixated on things more than what really we would focus more on.
Yeah.
So let's get into at least a treatment summary of the script here. So Maximus, he wakes up in the afterlife. He is led to what looks like a refugee camp, which is called Elysium, which is supposed to represent purgatory. Also, there's a gladiator tournament that involves alligators. Anyway.
Wait, that's not in the underworld, though, right?
It is.
Wait, no, I was just listening to the canceled movie report thing today, and that was after he was already back.
Or was it a flash? Yeah, it was a flash to that gladiator fight.
I thought it was like after he would already like come back to Earth and like got involved in a gladiator fight with alligators in a half-flooded.
Oh, no.
But maybe I was wrong on the timeline from listening to the podcast today.
I think it's supposed to be a flash forward.
Gotcha.
To it, or like what's supposed to happen, because it definitely happens really early on in the script.
Oh, interesting.
But I know that, yes, there is another gladiator fight that does happen that has alligators as well.
Yeah.
But
really awesome to have a gladiator fight in a half-flooded Coliseum with alligators.
And like right away he delivers, and I feel like he kind of did that on purpose to be like, well, it's Gladiator 2, you know what it needs, unlike the other two? Gladiators.
Yeah.
So he's delivering. So there he meets Mordecai, who guides him through the afterlife. They make their way to the Temple of Ruins, and that's where he bargains with the 7 dying gods. There's Jupiter, Apollo, Pluto, Neptune, Mars, Mercury, and Bacchus. So there he was asked to kill Hephaestus, who has betrayed the gods. He believes that there is one true god and is indirectly killing the remaining gods now that more and more people discontinue believing in them. And if Maximus kills him, then he is promised to be reunited with his son and wife. This is supposed to be Roman gods, and yet I think one of them, I forget who it is, maybe Bacchus or Hephaestus, I think is a Greek god.
Nick Cave is mixing up his mythology.
I think so. I'm giving him the benefit of the doubt that this is his first draft. And this would be later caught on by like at least someone.
Yeah.
Some sort of dramaturg. Like, what's the equivalent of dramaturgs in movies? I don't know. Not a script supervisor, but someone would have looked at that and been like, oh, you got some of the gods wrong. We'll just quickly replace that. Anyway, first draft, whatever. I'll forgive him for that. Before Maximus goes to find Hephaestus, he is warned that he has been lied to by the gods, and the fate of his son and wife are already determined. Mordecai explains that she sacrificed herself and is now lost somewhere in Elysium, so that their son, Marius, may live on Earth. Maximus ignores the warning and proceeds with his mission. Maximus finds himself in the desert, and he has dreams of his wife, Maria, who cries out, "Help us!" He even sees a dying steer that opens his mouth, and he hears the voice of his wife crying out for help. He eventually finds Hephaestus, who says, "I've been waiting for you," which is such a great moment. To be like, oh, I got to kill this guy, and he'll be like, oh, I've been expecting you. And it's like, what? It's like, yeah. So Hephaestus explains that the gods are a dying breed and that there is one true God. So there's definitely a lot of Christian theme there, which is, it's odd. Like, Nick Cave is not really known for that.
It feels more like it's about like the changing of religion and the changing of this new major religion taking away from the old religion. And that's one of the interesting things I was thinking about today, because I was listening to the Canceled Movie Report and their fantastic, breakdown of the script and reading through a lot of the scenes. But one of the things that somebody on there brought up was this is adding this whole spiritual element that was not there in Gladiator. It is there a little bit. Maximus is kind of a religious person, or at least like a lot of his dialogue is talking about how the things we do in this life echo into eternity, and he's constantly obsessed with the idea of meeting his family in the afterlife. And so there is a belief there, and there's even shots of it that show that with him, running his hand through the fields of wheat and everything.
Blessed Father, watch over my wife and son. Listen to them that I live only to hold them again.
What's so interesting about this is that it takes what was metaphorical in Gladiator and turns it into something that is literal in this world. And I don't think that the idea of that is necessarily that bad or crazy in the face of Gladiator. I think it does make sense to be like, okay, they're talking so much about religion in this movie. Let's actually take that to a literal degree. I think that can work. I think it also sounds like the ideas of a crazy coked out screenwriter, and I have no clue, if Nick Cave has any history with drug abuse, but it definitely sounds like something you would get in a cutaway scene in 30 Rock of just like what the ideas of coked out screenwriters would be.
Yeah, and I feel like he was trying to cater to two different audiences where
Yeah.
Knowing that he is now the third screenwriter on this, and the fact that they rejected the first two ideas because there wasn't any gladiator scenes, and the fact that Russell Crowe wanted to explore the beliefs, the religious beliefs of the Roman Empire. So it makes sense for him to kind of just like mash those two together. It doesn't feel like his story, but he's just the one who's writing it down in his own crazy ways. I guess crazy is kind of a harsh way of putting it, but like his own, I guess, more unique ways of doing it.
Unexpected.
Yeah, I really like that. I would say unexpected. I'll take back crazy, but unexpected ways of like catering to the ideas that he knows will be accepted.
Yeah.
Which is baffling that none of it got accepted at all. We enter the reincarnation scene, and this is so weird. So Maximus is reincarnated back into his same body, but is now in the City of Lions, and he actually emerges out of a Christian.
I mean, if you're going to have Russell Crowe, you got to have like actual Russell Crowe on screen. You can't have him be like quantum leaping around or something.
No. But the way he emerges, like I read it on the page and I had to look into different interpretations of what this actually means. Because I was trying to wrap my head around it because, again, Nick Cave, writing in his unexpected ways, so like Maximus emerges out of a Christian.
Like peeling back like the skin and just like chest burster alien out of him.
Yeah, like the human is a banana and he's the banana coming out.
Yeah.
As the other banana. It's such a strange, weird visual.
Yeah.
He's doing this in the middle of a battle. So like there are other people around. It's not like they were like in a camp, like this guy's like hidden in a tent. He just suddenly emerges out of him. Like he is thrust in the middle of a battle. Everyone else is around him and no one's looking at him like, that dude just come out of another dude? But yeah, he's in the middle of a battle. It's between the Christians and the Romans, and this is being led by Lucius, the Roman Empire, which is the boy from the first film, but now he's all grown up, the last heir of Marcus Aurelius. So the Christians are trying to protect Polythnus. Yeah, I mean, no, that's how it's written in the script. I feel like there's a different way of spelling it, though.
Yeah.
So we're just going to go by the Nick Cave spelling, Polythnus. They are unsuccessful. Polythnus is decapitated by Lucius, and Maximus gets away, and he steals a horse.
It's also interesting that it seems like in the other drafts of this, Lucius was going to be the new hero, but in this case, he's going to be the new villain.
At least they're trying to keep him in here somehow, which is an interesting way of keeping him in there. He encounters two people, Peter and Marcus, who claim they have been working for him and in need of his help. He's brought to their leader, Irenaeus. Irenaeus explains to Maximus that Lucius and the Romans want to wipe out and destroy all the Christians. They need help alerting their leader in Rome, Cassian, who's a school teacher, and that the leaders in Rome are on the verge of finding him. Maximus, though, refuses to help, so he takes off to Rome in search of his son instead. On his way to Rome, he witnesses a family of butchered Christians, basically just like remains of Christians on the way there, more emphasizing like Christians are being persecuted. Mordecai returns. I'm not really understanding the rules of Mordecai and how he falls into this, but sure. He returns to inform Maximus that he has angered the gods, and now he may never return because he did not kill Aphaesius. This is also when he tells him that they are now many years in the future from when he died, that his boy is now a man, and he is also a Christian. He makes his way to an inn where the innkeeper also recognizes him. Which, I mean, if you're the one who killed Joaquin Phoenix, like, your face is definitely going to be recognized.
Yeah.
We then go to the palace where we have Emperor Decius. He talks to Lucius about being too bloodthirsty, but Lucius defends himself that all of the things happening in Rome are a result of the gods being angry. In order to stop this, Christians must be destroyed and the leader must be found and removed. Decius reveals that a census is being conducted around the city, and if you're a Christian, you have to reveal the location of Cassius, or they will arrest you and force you to fight in the Colosseum, stating that the people will be entertained.
Gotta call back to the classic line.
Are you not entertained?
Gotta do it. Like I said, Nick, he's catering this whole time.
Yeah,
He's just catering.
It's like how, they had to slip an I Am Iron Man into Avengers Endgame.
True. Yes. So we cut to Cassian's house where we find him, and a bunch of Christians are discussing what they are going to do because of the census. Maximus, who I guess found Cassian so quickly, even though he was looking for a son, he arrives and warns them of the Romans and Lucius and what they'll do, and that he witnessed Polythnus getting beheaded.
Mm-hmm.
There, Marius, his son, appears and asks Maximus to leave when he informs them that he used to be a Roman soldier. So now we have that father-son dynamic, even though they don't tell each other that they are. Maximus finds Cassian to talk. Cassian apologizes for his student's behavior from before and explains that his adopted son, Marius, has a quick temper. Maximus makes his way back to the inn and encounters a group of his fans waiting there, I guess, because it's so weird. But there he encounters Juba.
My wife and my son are already waiting for me.
You'll meet them again. But not yet.
Who was one of his friends while he was a gladiator. And they talk and catch up. Maximus explains what happened to him, just in case you weren't there for the first half of the movie. And Juba gifts Maximus with 2 figures of his wife and his son, which we see from the first movie.
Yeah. And Juba is, of course, a great character in the first movie as well.
He is. So cut to Lucius, who is torturing a Christian family. Wow, they're really grinding that stone there. The mother, Rachel, reveals the identity of their leader, Cassian, and that he is a school teacher. So they're closing in on him. The next morning, Maximus seeks out Marius to have a conversation about loyalty and his time as a Roman soldier. Marius compares Maximus to the Apostle Paul, a man that persecuted Christians, and how he heard the voice of God.
Saul, why persecutest thou me?
And chose to convert others to Christianity. Marius talks further about his birth, his father's absent, and Maximus talks about how he was separated from his wife and only son. So they're kind of hinting at it, but they're not going to say this out loud, which kind of frustrates me and aggravates me. You're just like, just say it, just do it. And I think that scene can still be interesting, even if Maximus says, like, I'm your father, and he'll be like, that's crazy. How could that happen?
That's not true.
Yeah.
That's impossible.
So I think you killed my father.
It is kind of surprising that they never have that scene in the screenplay of him saying, hey, I'm your father.
Not in a straightforward fashion.
Okay.
But I think there's this understanding towards the end that they realize that they are somewhat related. All right, so we're going to fast forward to some of the interesting parts. Lucius bursts into one of Cassian's classes. Lucius fixates on Cassian's fish necklace. You've been in Michigan before. You've seen those like fish bumper stickers on there. Yeah, it's like
that started as like a secret symbol of the way Christians could help identify each other.
Yeah. I remember being in my Catholic high school, one of my religion classes, the way that they would do that was that if you're walking past someone and you suspect that they are a Christian, what you would do is with your foot, you would put a dash in the sand, like half of a C. Mm-hmm. And then if that person goes up to that dash you made with your foot and they completed it to make a fish, then you would know that they were a Christian. I don't know how much of that is actually true, but I always thought that it was an interesting story.
Absolutely.
So Lucius is fixated on Cassian's fish necklace, using the fish as a metaphor for the Christian faith. He blames the fish for all of the plaguing in the Roman Empire, and the scene ends with Lucius stabbing Cassian in the neck to death.
You just took one in the jugular, man. Oh my God, I did. Is this bad?
They got him. So now what? Marius runs out of the classroom. Lucius orders his 3 guards to seize him, but he manages to escape and finds Maximus and asks for his help to create an army. Now we enter the montage scene. They recruit and train a bunch of Christians to rebel against the Romans. We then cut to a Colosseum. Again, finally. The thing we've all been waiting for this whole movie. The Colosseum is filled with people.
We are going to be entertained.
Yeah, we have to. The arena has been flooded with about 4 feet of water and is filled with hundreds of alligators. The Christians kneel in prayer as gladiators fire arrows, throw spears, and fireballs at them while they are being eaten by the gators. There, Lucius informs Decius of the army led by the resurrected Maximus. The Empire is then given permission to him to crush him, even though he's bloodthirsty. But I guess that makes sense. Be like, well, here's your chance to actually explain this characteristic that we dismissed in the first act.
Yeah.
Lucius finds a way to kidnap Juba, Maximus's old friend. He finds Maximus and threatens not to attack him or Juba will be killed. Lucius calls out Maximus about he mourned his death and somehow came back to life. He informs him about his wife and how the Christians took advantage of her and now they're responsible for her death, which is now going to be a setup for the big battle.
Mm-hmm.
Maximus informs all the Christians in Rome to leave their houses. Meanwhile, thousands of citizens are going to the town square to offer their animals to be sacrificed to the altar and to pledge their allegiance to Rome and have their names ticked off the census. Blood fills the square. The remaining 200 Christians gather in the woods outside of Rome, getting ready to battle. There, Maximus has one last talk with Marius. This is where they kind of acknowledge that they're father and son, but again, not straightforward about it, which, why not? I don't see what the idea of like being secretive about this is, which is strange. I don't know. We'll see. So, Lucius and his army charge the Christians. In the midst of the battle, Lucius kills Juba by cutting his throat. Maximus is furious and chases down Lucius on horseback, hunts him down. Lucius realizes he has been defeated and says, "Only at your hands, Maximus." And just as he's about to swing his sword for the final blow, an arrow hits Lucius in the neck. Maximus looks up to see Marius with a bow in his hand. Marius drops to his knees, exclaiming, "O Lord, what have we done?" In the clearing is a dying steer, same one that we kind of saw in the beginning, where it's his wife like yelling, "Help me!" out of
those visual motifs.
Mm-hmm. You got to put in a metaphor somewhere, but I don't know what this metaphor means. It's just kind of like, we'll put it in there and maybe people will figure it out. Maximus kneels down. He rubs dirt in his hand, which is something that we see in the first film. That is what should be the conclusion of this movie, but it is not the last battle for Maximus and his journey. This was kind of explained or hinted to when Mordecai came down, saying like the gods were angry with him and like the deal is off and whatnot. And I feel like this is kind of like his punishment, his eternal hell almost, because now Maximus is an eternal warrior. In the last 20 minutes of the film is Maximus fighting in every major war in history. Maximus is in the Middle East fighting in the Crusades. He's again fighting in Rome. He's in the European battlefield, but now he has a bunch of automatic weapons. Cut to the... Oh!
Is that supposed to be World War I or World War II?
Yeah. Oh, it keeps going back and forth, because now he was fighting in the Crusades. Now he's fighting in Rome again. He's in the European battle, and then he goes back to the woods of the Rome and then back into Europe. Now he has a bunch of automatic weapons. Cut back to Rome, and then back to the Vietnam War, then back to Rome, and then it finishes with him in the Pentagon in Washington. So it isn't him like going through there. It's like he just keeps going back and forth, back and forth, back and forth.
Yeah.
That makes sense now. Or does it? No, it doesn't. So Maximus, when we are in the Pentagon, he's washing his hands in the bathroom, and sure enough, behind him is Mordecai, who says, "Until eternity itself has said its prayers." Maximus then makes his way to the Situation Room, and the very last line of the movie is him sitting down and saying, "Now, where were we?" And you roll credits.
And he sits down and he says, "Now, are you not entertained, Mr. President?"
Oh.
Oh,
yeah, so
man.
like, I know it says the last 20 minutes of the movie is him going through this major montage, but like we mentioned before, if you read the script, this is literally just the last 2 pages of the script.
That whole thing is so weird. Like, I think the thing that sticks out to me the most is that it doesn't mean anything, and it doesn't actually add anything to the character of Maximus or to this story. Is it supposed to be like, oh, you could have done it where it's like every war stems from him? No, that's not it. He's just taking a part in every war. I think about the Wolverine montage in one of those Wolverine movies of him like fighting in all these wars. And like that's supposed to be a character development of who Wolverine is and who Logan is and how that has molded him as a person. Or there's like the implication in Wonder Woman that like Ares is the cause of every war. And like, these are examples of, I mean, both those are comic book movies, but you know, these examples of every war being connected to this one person or this one thing, but it doesn't mean anything in this instance. And again, I'm going to go back to the, it feels like a coked out screenwriter being like, you know what would be awesome? This, without any thought as to what it actually means.
Yeah. Because we don't need that last sequence. Like, I actually enjoyed the main storyline. Like, him having to reunite with his son, having to battle against an empire that is looked upon as corrupt. And I think that's a fascinating story.
And it's like a different battle that they're waging now.
Yeah. So, and then it leads up to like the big third act fight, which, I mean, that's kind of what they're going for. And we get a gladiator scene as well. It's an interesting story.
And there's the conflict of like his son now believes something different than him. And there's that conflict there. The story could work if Maximus didn't die in Gladiator 1 and you cut out all of the spiritual stuff. Again, if you moved the talk of gods back into the metaphorical as opposed to the literal, I think it could work.
I see this as a completely different movie. I think they're tied to the fact that it needs to be a Gladiator movie. This needs to be Maximus. This needs to be Russell Crowe. I think their tie to the story is really what's hindering them in holding back what this story could potentially be. By itself, though, if you had like a brief synopsis of kind of a gladiator story, or if, like, it's mostly about the revolution of the Christianity in Rome, which is the fascinating part, and kind of the rebellion against the Roman Empire and the Roman religious beliefs. That's an interesting story, and there has been stories done about that before, but the fact that it's tied to Gladiator, I feel like that's really what's hindering the story and not making it work as well. But that was the story that Nick Cave had come up with, and I don't know, it's a fun read to go through. If you get a chance to read the script, I highly recommend it, and I'll probably put that link on our Twitter page when this comes out. Now, let's talk a little bit about kind of what follows afterwards.
Do we know anything about like what happened with this script after it was written? Was it just kind of like the studio said, no, this is insane and we're not going to do it?
Yeah, the studio said no. Russell Crowe wasn't happy with it. Ridley Scott looked like he was looking for some sort of story that did work.
And everybody just kind of moved on.
Yeah, and I can see Ridley Scott looking at the story being like, it could use some work, but the elements that people are looking for are there.
Yeah.
I can see him looking at this as like, this is viable.
Absolutely.
I mean, we can workshop it. I don't want to blame Nick Cave on everything just because.
It's just so fun to talk about that weird idea.
Yeah, it is. I like that he just went like balls to the wall, especially in the last 2 pages where it just felt like that was his fuck it moment.
Yeah.
He was like, I don't care anymore.
Yeah.
It's like, I don't care about this. I did as much as I could, and you know what? I'm going to also make this as action-packed as possible.
Yeah.
And even though it's given away so much of the ending, like, all of that footage would most likely be used for all of the trailer.
Yeah. Yeah. It's like the gray. Like, it's going to all sell you on this thing that only happens at the end, but even really barely even happens at that.
Yeah, it does. We never get to see the fight. Well, I guess we see that he dies after the credits.
Are you talking about the gray? Yeah, I just love how, like, all of the marketing for that movie was Liam Neeson punches wolves! And then literally we get to the very end, he's about to punch a wolf, and we cut to black.
So disappointing. But that
biggest marketing troll. Movie's not that bad. Movie's solid.
Visually, it looks amazing. It was one of the more beautiful movies I had ever seen.
It's like well paced and it's got a good like tense, survival plot. The characters aren't that memorable, but the situations and the set pieces definitely are. Yeah, it's not a bad movie.
It isn't. No. All right. The sequel is still possible, which is weird to say. And Ridley Scott has been kind of pushing for it, even though he's been kind of quiet about it. But he did reveal in a March 2017 Entertainment Weekly interview, having this idea of a script, but finding ways to use Russell Crowe. He said, I know how to bring him back. I was having this talk with the studio, but he's dead. But there is a way of bringing him back. Whether it will happen, I don't know. Gladiator was in the year 2000, so Russell's changed a bit, which I think is just Ridley Scott's backhanded way of like, Russell got fat.
Oh.
I know. It was a better way of saying.
Yeah.
But he's doing something right now, but I'm trying to get him back down here. And then in November of 2018, Deadline made the announcement that Peter Craig, who is the writer of The Town, Hunger Games, Mockingjay, Bad Boys for Life, and the newest Top Gun movie, Top Gun Maverick, that he was going to write a sequel under Paramount Pictures. And Universal would help co-finance the film, and DreamWorks would have nothing to do with this. There was no word if Russell Crowe would be involved. The story seemed to rely heavy on the character Lucius. In the movie Web interview, producer Walter F. Parks and Laurie McDonald confirmed that the sequel is still in development, but the story is going to pick up now 25 to 30 years after the original. Nick Cave explained in a Variety interview, I'm very comfortable with my day job as a musician. The last thing I ever wanted to get involved with is Hollywood, which is very ironic now. The way it works is that people get an idea you could possibly do something, but there is a 1 in 100 chance that it could get made. It's a waste of fucking time, and I have a lot to do. You can tell he was definitely bitter about this because I feel like he was roped in as the Maximus savior to bring this movie franchise out of the dirt, for him to be shat upon like that. He's like, why even try? I didn't even want to do this.
Yeah. I can't believe that they're still trying to go forward with this. Like, let it be. We don't need a Gladiator 2. Nobody's asking for this.
No, it's a good movie by itself. And I can't think of any movie that would be a good companion to it.
Yeah.
So, yeah, leave it as it is. You got your best picture. I'm good with Gladiator as it is.
I think with this movie, whether or not it should have been made, it shouldn't have been made, would have been a bad movie, and it's good that it didn't get made. It would have been really interesting to see this, but it's like, even as wild as some of the aspects of the script are, and some of the aspects of the way that Nick Cave views his script is, you know that would all be watered down by studio anyways, and it wouldn't actually be as wild and crazy and interesting as it is right now. So I say let this stay as a legend in movies that didn't get made, and leave it at that.
Yeah, I completely agree with it. Just like, it's a fun story to go through. Had they made it, it would have been terrible. And even looking at the previous two ideas, Gladiator was the superior story. Like, I don't really care about the past of Maximus. I don't care about him going through the ranks of the Roman army. Like, we already stated that in the first film. Like,
and in the first film, it's more of just like the archetype. You say he used to be a Roman general, and it's like, oh, I get it. I get what this character is about, and like what kind of motivations he has, and there's no need to explain that.
Yeah, I kind of look at it like Solo, almost.
Yeah,
like, we get a good idea of who Han Solo is.
We know what it means to be a scoundrel. You don't need to explain how he became a scoundrel.
Yeah, don't make any sequels, prequels, anything to Gladiator. Just leave it how it is. We're really happy with that. Make some more Alien movies. Like, that's great. I don't mind that.
Yeah.
Keep going with that. Even if he has to go against the Predator, great. That's fun. That's they're fun movies at that point. Like, just leave it as it is.
I really don't ever want to see the idea of this eternal warrior fighting in every single war. I think that is a bad idea, and I never want to see it. Whether it's attached to Gladiator or not, I just think that is ridiculous and silly.
I agree.
All right, that's going to be wrapping us up. Thanks for sharing this story.
Yeah. I'm glad to have gone through and explored all of it. I'm so happy that the Canceled Movie Report guys actually did a full-on, like a really well-done table read of it. So after you listen to us, or if you listen to us afterward, great. Check out their table read for this. Like, they really like liven up the story, and you get to experience it pretty well.
And they also post all of their podcast episodes on YouTube as well, so you can listen to it through YouTube.
We also post ours on YouTube as well.
Oh, we do?
Yeah.
Oh, awesome.
It was because of my mom. I told my mom that this show was premiering, and she's like, "Oh, where can I watch it on YouTube?" I was like, "It's not going to be on YouTube." She's like, "Well, I only listen to things on YouTube." I was like, "I'll put it on YouTube."
Okay.
So
guess we should put things on YouTube.
So if you want to listen to it on YouTube, great. But I will tell you that the YouTube channel is solely for my mom.
Well, thank you, everybody, for listening. If you want to find more episodes of this, not only can you go to YouTube, but you can also go to pipedreampodcast.com, where we have links to every podcatcher feed that you can find us on, and all of our past episodes. Also on pipedreampodcast.com, we've got other podcasts like The Weird Alphabet and Come On Fahoogwapods. So go check all of that out.
Yeah.
If you want to send us emails, send those to notgetmade@gmail.com. Let us know if we missed anything, if there's more information that you want to share with us, or if there are other movies that you know about that we should talk about. And finally, you can find us on social media. We're on Twitter and Instagram at HDTNGM.
Yep, so that's Twitter, and then How Did This Not Get Made is Instagram.
Instagram is at How Did This Not Get Made. I didn't realize you could have a handle that long.
I didn't realize that either, but I was really excited that it did.
All right, so go check that out. Thanks, everybody, again for listening, and we'll see you next time.
Bye.